Hey everyone, Brandon here with Galloway Precision. Today we're going to go over the installation of the LCP2 Sigurd short stroke trigger in the LCP2 22LR, as well as the 22LR spring kit, which will include a 10% increased rate hammer, a 10% reduced rate firing pin spring, and a 10% increased rate extractor spring. All right, and this solved a lot of the issues that were being reported to us on the pistol and that we had ourselves. Tools you're going to need a 1/16 punch, a 1/8 inch punch, your shepherd's crook pick, your brass polymer hammer, and a pair of needle nose pliers, as well as your bench block. So let's go ahead and lock and clear. We're visually and physically empty. So let's go ahead and strip our slide. And that's where we'll start. Go ahead and take your barrel and guide rod out. And we're going to flip our bench block upside down. We're going to start with the firing pin. Okay, as you can see how the firing pin is. It has this one roll pin that holds it in place. So you're going to start. You're going to need your 3/32 punch. It'll also be in the list. All right. Now, don't just go yanking your pin punch out. It is under pressure, spring pressure, and it'll go flying across the room. All right. So you're going to take your firing pin spring, which will have a blue mark on it. It will look completely different. I already have the stock spring or our spring kit installed from testing the stock springs. I set down somewhere and probably lost them forever, but we'll take the firing pin spring off and stick that in your little baggie of goodies that this will come in. I just don't have the stickers ready for it yet. You'll take your new firing pin spring, go ahead and place it on there. Now the way this is going to sit is the curve goes up, okay? This solid part will go down in the side, and if you actually look in your firing pin channel, it goes up at an angle, and ours is actually cut off center. If you really look at it, you'll notice that our flat spot there is sitting at about a probably 20-degree angle where the firing pin comes out. It's hard to see in the video, but so just make sure that's all lined up and drop it back in, and you'll know you're lined up because you'll be able to take your 3/32 and push it through. If you can't get it to go through, you're not lined up. So just kind of fiddle with it until you get it all lined up, which is usually easier said than done. And before anyone asks, I have no idea what material they're using for the firing pin and guide rod. Something stupid light, and I would imagine memmed or cast, because it is nice and light. All right, so once you have the roll pin started a little bit, go ahead and just push in on your firing pin, let it go. We're doing that to make sure that the roll pin got started in the proper place. We're just going to send it home. All right, now they're using a compression pin. So you don't want to sit here and drive this thing until it comes out the other side. You don't want to beat on it, because you do that and then firing pin's going to come out while you're shooting it. So just hand tight, man. Just tap it, and you'll have probably roughly a 1/16 of an inch from the end of the roll pin to the hole opening on that side, and that's good. Leave it there. Don't go any further. If you drive it all the way through and you make that pin the size of this hole, it ain't gonna hold inside the slide. So now we're ready to move on to the extractor. So we're gonna take our 1/16, knock out this, or I'm sorry, 3/32 again. Alright, we don't got to drive our pin all the way out. I normally do, but there's really no need to. Once you get to a certain point where you can feel the extractor moving, you can go ahead and take it off. Take out your old extractor spring, place it in your bag, put your new extractor spring on its little nub, or set it down. Ooh, don't throw it across the bench like that, because it's teeny. Or you can set it in its little hole, line it up, and you'll notice something. Let's go ahead and talk about this while we go to depart. Notice the extractor hole way bigger than the actual pin. This extractor is actually floating back and forth when it's pulling the round out. So I think the spring just didn't have enough oomph behind it. This 10% increase, on the other hand, gave us no problems through about 100 rounds or more. So again, once you get it started, you can go ahead and sit it down, take your 3/32, and you just want it even with the top. You don't got to go completely equidistant on this one. You just want it even with the top. Don't drive it too far down, or it'll hit the slide rails. It won't function correctly. So we'll put our barrel back in, and we'll put our guide rod back in. We're done with the easy part. Now, moving on to the frame. Take your 3/32 and push that button in. Pop your hammer spring cover off. Maybe. Alrighty. And take our hammer spring seat out. We're going to take our 1/8 inch punch, and we're going to drive out our frame pins. Now the frame pins on the 22 are steel. Why don't they do that on the 380, I get asked? Well, I'll tell you why. 22 is a much more low power round, so it needs as rigid a possible platform, especially when it essentially fires in a blowback state. Just because it's really hard to do a locked recoil breech. Notice that it does tilt some, but not very much. And that's because with the 22, you just don't have the inertia you would normally need. Yeah, it tilts, but it's not anywhere near what it would be in a center fire pistol. And that's because you need the rigidity for the 22, because it's a weak round. You need something nice and solid to help it out. So hence why it has steel pins. And before you ask, yes, we're looking at doing stainless steel pins. Purdy it up. Alright, so we're going to take out our rear frame pin, and the way you differentiate between the two is your rear has a little notch in it right there. Your front will be smooth. Okay, set those off to the side. I'm going to take our pick. I'm going to put it right here. Notice how all I'm doing is separating it enough to where I can push the body up, because it sinks around that area right there, and really all you need is to pull it aside with your pick as you're pushing it out. Now if it's fighting you, you can do what I just did, where you pry out one side, push up on the back, or you can just grab a tiny screwdriver. This is a very important part. This is your trigger bar disconnect. Won't work without it. It's going to fall out the moment you start pulling the chassis out, so hold on to that. Keep an eye out for it. Alright, so now we've got our trigger bar off. We're just going to kind of shake and let everything fall on the bench. So our hammer pin fell out, hammer comes out, your safety is going to come out, trigger bar is going to come off. Go ahead and remove your slide lock. No need to remove the safety. It's going to flop around in there, but if it does fall out, which the spring does a pretty good job of keeping it in there, but if it does manage to fall out, you're going to take, and it's going to look just like this. Alright, line up just like that. That's it. That's all you got to do. Then this long arm, you're going to set it up, and the long arm goes into the square hole, and your safety spring's back in place. Alright, so now that we've gone that far, we're going to take our 1/16, and you should probably just have to push. We're going to push out our safety blade pin. If you don't, if it's too hard, just tap it. Doesn't matter which side you drive it from. Take the safety off. Now we're ready to remove our safety blade spring, safety. We can get to our pin. So we're going to push that pin out. We're going to push the trigger pivot and everything else out. We're going to put our stock trigger back together so we don't lose our pieces. Listen, do as I say, not as I do. Don't lose your pieces. I lose stuff all the time. It's part of my job, though. I tear stuff up. Don't tear stuff up. Leave it to the professionals. All right, so take that and put that in our little bag of goodies. We'll take our new Sigurd. All right, now before we put this in, we've stripped everything but the mag disconnect, okay? Mag safety disconnect, mine's not working just because I threw it back in here to get it working. But if you are going to run the Sigurd, the magazine disconnect has to come out, okay? So if you're not going to run the Sigurd, you just want the spring kit, ignore this next part because this is not going to apply to you. This is for only those that are installing the Sigurd. So we've removed our trigger, it's out of the way of our block. We're going to take our 1/16. You'll see this small hole. Push that out, and it may be a little tight under spring tension. Just tap it, and then pretty much take your 1/16 and just push. And here's what all is going to come out: your spring, the disconnect, and the pin. All right, the pin is not needed. It looks like it is, but it sits flush beyond the spring, so it's not needed. So go ahead and stick that stuff in your stock parts goodie bag. Why? Warranty work. If you send it back for warranty work, they're going to return it to stock. Keep your stock part or your aftermarket parts and then say, all right, so now we're ready to install the trigger. Now here's the thing with Ruger, everything is cast or MIM. So your pin may be slightly oversized. If that's the case, all you need is some 240 grit sandpaper or emery cloth. Take it. It's easier to do with the pliers so you can hold on to it and just take a little bit off. And go from not fitting right to just sliding right up on in there. That's all it takes, because it's usually one of two things. It's going to be a little bit of a buildup of anodizing inside there from getting it anodized, or the pin being oversized. Now, this is the easier thing to fit. So just take, if you go to put it in, it doesn't quite seat, take your pin, clean it up, and you're ready to go. All right, so we've removed our safety mag disconnect. I'm going to take our pivot, go ahead and install it, making sure that our trigger return spring is sweeping forward. All right, sitting at about the 3. Now, if you're like me and you got fat sausage hands, since this is steel, magnetic steel, you can use your magnetic end screwdriver if you want to put that pin in, or you can take your needle nose and hold on to it and insert it that way. But once it's in, I like to take the punch, push down on it, make sure it's seated, and I'll push in on the safety blade and just move it back and forth to make sure everything's moving. Okay, it's not a functions check, guys. I'm just moving it, see what it's doing. All right, so now we're going to take the hammer. We're going to take our 1/16, and from this side, from the right side of the hammer, we're going to drive out this pin. It cannot be driven from right to left. They purposely mold the hammer to where it can't come out but one direction. Okay. Once you drive it out a little bit, you'll be able to actually take the spring off. Again, I've got the other spring hooked on. Alright, so you'll actually remove that a lot more than I have and take your old spring off. Then we're going to take and reseat. Use your 3/32 and reseat the pin. We purposely had ISMI make this to where we can literally do that. Now notice the hook is backwards. Not a big deal. Easy peasy. This will also help you differentiate between aftermarket and your stock one. Okay, so take your stock hammer spring, stick it in your goodie bag. Now we're going to start the rebuild chassis process. First, we're going to take the hammer and install it. Take our hammer pin, go ahead and put it in. Right now you're all thinking, how the hell are we going to put this hammer in upside down? You'll see. Hammer spring, not hammer. I like to take and let everything fall out. And this one's been through some paces, so we'll put all that back in a second. Once you get your hammer and everything in place and sitting nice and pretty, take your shepherd's hook, push up on the bottom of the retaining spring. This is actually what retains the pistol together, but also is the spring for the slide lock. Push it up, put the slide lock in, go back and put our hammer back in that fell out, because, you know, this pistol's gonna be like, screw you, pal. Make me better, how dare you. Now we're all just gonna watch struggle vision for a while I try and use 15 different hands. Put this stupid thing back together. There is a whole lot going on inside this gun, guys, so just keep that in mind. And as usual, if you don't want to do it yourself, we do install it for a nominal fee, $50 labor and shipping both ways, and I'll do all the hard stuff for you. Alright, so we're going to hold that and put our hammer back in again. Keep my pinky in the way of the hole so it can't fall out that side. Now here's the tricky part. We're going to put the disconnect in and put a little Earl on there. And it doesn't take much, guys. You don't need to soak these guns. Just enough that the trigger bar can move around without you having to take it all back apart again. Remember, when you do this work to these guns, go ahead and put oil right there. Always oil them. Alright, now that we're holding 15 different pieces together, make sure you keep your finger over the disconnect. Keep a thumb over the slide lock. Now we're going to put our safety in, red to the rear. And now we're ready to start putting the whole thing back in. So once you get to this point and you can hold everything together, take your 3/32 and push forward on the hammer catch and seat the whole thing. Now, just like we do with every other trigger, once that's all set and the hammer catch is back where it should be, I like to pop it forward and move the trigger a little bit. The hammer should move. It's not going to cock, it's not going to fire, it's not under tension, but it should move around. If it moves, we're good to go. Go ahead and line up your safety inside. Take your rear frame pin, which has a split in the middle. Take your polymer side, drive it home. Put our front frame pin in. Now what we're going to do is going to take our shepherd's hook. I'm going to grab the hammer spring and go ahead and pull it up. I'm going to hold it just like this. Whoop. And hopefully that won't happen to you, but it probably will a time or two. Just hold that out of the way. This gun's bound and determined to make a liar out of me today. Alright. Drop that inside, why not? Alright, so see, I'm going to hold it like this. I'm going to pull up the spring. While the hammer seat stays in place. Boom. Okay. Once we've got that done, we're going to put our hammer seat cover back on. Find your takedown. Go ahead and put your slide on. Takedown in. And now we'll functions check. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to place it on safe. We've racked the slide. We're going to pull the trigger. Nothing happens. Take it off safe. Don't push on the safety blade, just the side of the trigger. Nothing happens. Press safety blade, fire. rack while holding to the rear, reset, fire, and you were good to go, guys. So that is it. That is the install of the Sigurd for the LCP 222 LR and the Sigurd spring kit for the 22 LR. No, the spring kit will not work in the 380. This is specifically designed around the 22. The Sigurd trigger itself works in both now. As you can see, we redesigned the blade so that it'll work just fine in the 22, and in future iterations of this trigger, we're going to close in the bottom of the trigger as well. But as you guys saw in the test video, I mean, completely different gun now. Really makes a huge difference. Like I said, great training pistol. We're working on a +5 for it to have 15 rounds on board, so it'll make a great bug gun competitor as well. But that's going to wrap this one up, guys. If you got any questions, feel free to email me at tech, that's Tango Echo Charlie Hotel, at gallowayprecision.com. Be sure to follow us here on social media on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe below. Go down into the description of the comments, in the comment section, description comments, you'll see the links for Firearms Friendly, Facebook, Instagram, and Vimeo. And as always, be safe, be accurate, and God bless.